Good morning, everybody. We've got a Saturday morning NBA slate. I don't know why the NBA schedules games this way, but for whatever reason, Saturdays and Sundays, they decide that we need afternoon playoff games. I don't mind it, especially not today, because I get to break down games with Ryan. And Ryan and I are friends, and we don't get to do very many shows together. Whenever we're on the schedule, for some reason, something goes sideways and it doesn't end up happening. But we've locked it in. We're here. We're starting it off. Ryan, what's going on?
Yeah, good morning. A little early NBA action. Uh, Busy sports day. Obviously, the Kentucky Derby's happening. But the NBA schedule has been kind of wonky of late. Just like I was shocked to see they took a day off, and here we are talking about a little two-game slate and a couple of game fours, and a couple exciting series is already taking place. A little chippiness happening in Golden State today, as Steve Kerr thinks Dillon Brooks broke their code.
Yeah, so I want to ask you, and we've got a little bit of liberty here to play with time. Only two games. Do us a favor, guys. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. What do you make of Dillon Brooks as a player overall? Because there's a lot of advanced stats that value him being not a great offensive player, but very valuable on defense. And I'm going to be biased because he seems to suck whenever I watch him play. But I hate the decision-making of Dillon Brooks because whenever he's playing, it seems like Dillon Brooks thinks the best player on the court is Dillon Brooks. And he would love to take all of the usage from Ja Morant. So I don't think he's all that great of a player. It's not going to matter that much for DFS, particularly like on FanDuel. I think he's really cheap and it's hard to get away from him. But do you like Dillon Brooks and do you think he's valuable?
Do I think he's valuable? No, and I do not enjoy him as a basketball player. I think honestly, he's kind of trash. I'm not too keen on Dillon Brooks. I know he's got a pretty nice contract. I think he only makes like 12 million a year. But even coming out of Oregon, I just was not the biggest fan of him. He seems kind of annoying. That's really about it. But I don't like Dillon Brooks, honestly. And we'll see what that rotation looks like without him today. He is suspended, so that is some important rotational breakdown. So it's a little different than the previous game. We've seen Steven Adams be out with health and safety protocols. Does he enter the rotation today? I don't think so, but you never know. But yeah, I don't like Dillon Brooks at all as a player. Honestly, I'd rather. I think there's a reason why there are times they play better without him on the court and they won the game last game, and he's with all that with him being pretty much gone for the whole game. He got ejected with 5 minutes left in the first quarter. So yeah, I don't think many people are the biggest fan of him either. He's just like maybe analytically, defensively, like you said, sticks out. But God, his offensive game is so bad.
Yeah, and by the way, I misspoke before because he is suspended today. Just I've played him a lot in this series because he's been cheap. And here's something also that drove me crazy last game. Two of my more rostered players last night were Dillon Brooks and Gary Payton II. And Brooks took both of them out 30 seconds into the game, gets himself kicked out and ultimately suspended for today, and also ended up injuring Gary Payton and broke his elbow on that play. So on a lot of these slates, we don't have that many, well, at least for playoff situations, we would normally think we don't have that much injury news to talk about. But for whatever reason, injuries keep popping up in these playoffs. So we're going to have to talk about the Warriors rotation without Gary Payton later, and then the Grizzlies rotation without Dillon Brooks. But first, let's talk about the first game on the slate, the Boston Celtics against the Milwaukee Bucks. As a lot of people know, I'm a big Boston Celtics fan. For this particular playoff series and for this playoff run in general, we've got a really tight game. Actually, this opened up as a Bucks -3.5 favorite. The line's been bet all the way down to -1.5. So looking at like a coin flip game, the next couple in Milwaukee, starting on the Boston side, Ryan, how do you feel about the pay up options here? Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who have both individually had some efficiency struggles in the series, but there's apparent upside as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a two-game slate, and you got to have some interest in them. It seems like this series is heading towards more of a Jaylen Brown series than a Jason Tatum series, as we've seen uh, Tatum kind of struggle. Obviously, he was lights out in the Brooklyn series, and I do think Marcus Smart returning does limit the ceiling a little bit. We saw Jaylen Brown get a lot more ball handling duty due to the foul trouble of Derek White last time, as when Marcus Smart was out. But I still think Marcus Smart, I don't expect his minutes to be as high as Brown and Tatum. And if you were to tell me to pick one Boston player to go with, either Brown or Tatum, I still am going to lean with Jaylen Brown, honestly. Brown comes in at $8,800 on FanDuel, checks in at $8,000 on DraftKings. And the way Milwaukee has handled Tatum, I think their ceilings are kind of similar. So I'd rather take the savings with Brown. I know you're getting Tatum at $10,000 on DraftKings, and he comes in at $10,000 on FanDuel. I'd rather play him on FanDuel than on DK, but I gotta prefer Jaylen Brown to Tatum among those two, the two-headed monster there in Boston.
Yeah, and to back up what you're saying there about how they're defending him, here's the usage rate for Tatum in the first couple games of the series: 26% and 28%. Now, obviously, those aren't insignificant, but it's lower than we normally see from Tatum. And to your point about how Milwaukee defends players, they do generally try to take away a team's best option. As a result, like Al Horford is just free to fire open threes whenever he wants. Marcus Smart has been free to open threes whenever he wants. That's just kind of how they defend, and they kind of sell out to defend like a Jason Tatum and let other guys beat them. So as a result, how does that change how you view some of the role players on the team in this matchup as compared to maybe another matchup when it comes to like a Marcus Smart or an Al Horford?
Yeah, so it's going to be, I'm going to keep an eye on any Ime Udoka, like I guess, pregame press conference of how they might handle Marcus Smart's minutes. Marcus Smart comes prices extremely well. If there is no minutes restriction for Marcus Smart, he comes in $6,300. He looks fantastic. I know he's not necessarily a role player. He's one of their better players, but just because of that price tag, I have to have significant interest in him. And it's always been that theory of role players play better at home than on the road. And I'm kind of shying away from some of the role players, especially Grant Williams, 4,500. That's just a little too expensive. There's going to be a game in this series where I think Robert Williams will play more minutes than Al Horford at some point. Robert Williams is priced extremely favorably for the block upside he has on FanDuel, 5,100, where he has power forward and center eligibility. We know those minutes can be higher. So I'm kind of potentially buying a little low on Robert Williams on the minutes upside. And he doesn't need to do much at that price tag. He can do his damage in mid-20s minutes. Like if you're telling me Robert Williams is going to get 25 minutes today, I'm going to have a lot of interest at 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,100. I really don't have much interest in guys coming off the bench, really. I mean, if there was a guy who I want to take a chance on coming off the bench, it would be a Derek White, just because Marcus Smart is coming off an injury. There's a chance of re-aggravation or re-injury. I don't have any issues if you play them both, just because of how well Derek White's priced at $3,900, $4,100 on FanDuel and DraftKings respectively. Not much ownership, and on these 2-game slates, it's if you nail that value option, like the sub 4K value option to open up your salary, it really does separate you from the rest of the field as ownership is much more concentrated on a 2-game slate. Derek White has the upside to get you 20 fantasy points, and if not higher, you would love to get mid-20s at that price tag, but he certainly has that. I know he's struggled in terms of getting fantasy production, but I just like that price tag where he just opened things up to get you for you to pay up for a potential Giannis.
Yeah, and the other thing to mention too about the Celtics, because you talked about any kind of potential minutes restriction on Marcus Smart, is they've been playing a really, really tight rotation this series. So last game, when there was no Marcus Smart, they only ran 7 guys. Tice was out of the rotation. And if you look at some of the minutes for other guys, like don't read anything into the 2 minutes from Hauser, Fitz, Cornette, any of those guys. It was just a blowout and they got a couple minutes of run. But this is essentially a 7-man rotation. I think it's probably going to be an 8-man rotation today with Marcus Smart back. And I also want to expand a little bit on what you said about Robert Williams, because I don't know what the minutes are going to look like, but there's potential for him to have a ceiling for playing time greater than what we've seen. So he had 5 personal fouls last game. And then also something else, he's coming back from that knee surgery that he had for a meniscus tear. And they've been a little cautious with his minutes to this point, but we've kind of slowly seen it ramp up. So first couple games he returned against the Nets, he played 16 and 14 minutes. Then he moves back into the starting lineup for the series against the Bucks, plays 22 minutes in game 1, 25 minutes in game 2, but there was also foul trouble. If there wasn't for the fouls, who knows how many minutes he would have played. But here's how I've been approaching some of these playoff spots. And I know that Robert Williams isn't some like massive contrarian play. He is projected for 38% ownership on FanDuel, and on DraftKings, he's projected for 31% ownership. But think of it this way. If we knew that there was no minutes restriction on Robert Williams, like we knew for sure, he'd be the most popular player on the slate because there isn't that much value available to us. I guess maybe Melton would be up there as well. But the point I'm making is in tournaments on a 2-game slate where I want to try to capture upside, I think Robert Williams is pretty clearly one of the highest upside plays on the slate relative to his salary because there's a chance that he has a ceiling for minutes that we haven't seen yet. So I'm with you. I really do like Robert Williams in tournaments.
Yeah, Rob Williams is. I think the ceiling is honestly he can put up 50 points in the spot. The minutes floor I think is 20, and he could play mid 30s. It could happen. We just haven't seen it yet, and I think that recency bias of just the minutes coming off from injury might keep that ownership low. And on 2-game slates, you got to take some chances on some players, and why not a cheaper price Rob Williams? I mean, he's pretty cheap at this price tag where the minutes, if you're telling me he can play 30 minutes, God, I mean, it's tough not to like him in significant fashion today, especially on FanDuel. I know he's 5,100. Those blocks really add up over there. I believe last year in the playoffs, he had an 11 block game. So, and not to say 11 blocks is on the horizon, but he picks those up in a hurry. And it's, yeah, like you know all the key aspects, and there's a pathway to real success there. And he seems like it grades out to be a fantastic play. The guy who I haven't been able to nail down this series or kind of in the playoffs at all, it's kind of been the revolution of Al Horford. He started off this regular season really well, then kind of tailed off towards the end of this regular season. Now he's been playing just really well throughout the series. I just don't think it's all that sustainable. His price tag puts him in a spot where he's going to have some ownership for sure. $5,900 on DraftKings and comes in at $7,200 on FanDuel. Man, I'd rather just take the savings on Rob Williams and just hope for that ceiling game or potential ceiling game from him. But if you want to play Horford, $5,900 on DraftKings, it makes sense why he's much more higher owned there. I don't have much interest over there on FanDuel. It's a tough price tag to go for in Al Horford. He is more expensive than guys like Draymond Green, Brandon Clark, even Andrew Wiggins, a bunch of guys who have higher minutes upside, and I think just have a higher ceiling, similar ceiling to him at that price tag. So I'm kind of off of Al Horford today on FanDuel, but he's one of those guys who's burned me all series long, kind of all playoffs long. How do you feel about Al Horford?
I prefer getting to Robert Williams. I said the same thing last game and it didn't go quite as well, and I know that people are just going to look at what's happened in the recent games on our roster. I'm like, we got Victor Oladipo at 30% owned yesterday because people just look at what happened last game and that's what they're building their lineups based on. And I think that's something that I was talking with Eric on the show yesterday. I think for ownership projection purposes, we probably have to consider that people are going to be so heavily swayed towards whatever happened last game and just thinking this is the way things are going forward when context gets ignored. Like, yeah, Victor Oladipo played extended minutes at one point because Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry were both out, and then Kyle Lowry returns, and Oladipo literally has the same exact ownership on FanDuel and DraftKings. So I think we're going to see something similar in terms of, because I've already seen it in chat. By the way, I understand people saying this. We're saying that this is an Al Horford series, not a Robert Williams series. But the context of that to this point is that Robert Williams is coming back from knee surgery, and he got in foul trouble last game. And in general, over the course of the entire season, when Robert Williams and Al Horford have shared the court together, Robert Williams has been the better fantasy producer. And I don't think the last 2 games all of a sudden changes that. I just think Robert Williams foul trouble and he's working himself back from injury. It doesn't mean he's going to be 100% today, but I'm willing to take the chance that he is going to be healthier when you consider that he's cheaper, and he's been more expensive than Al Horford for almost the entire season. So I think we're on the same page with this one.
Another key aspect to keep in mind here, the last time these 4 teams played was on Wednesday night. There was an extra day of rest per travel. So they had an extra day. There's an extra day of rest, which does play a factor in sometimes in minutes. I do think that is a factor that can elevate these guys' minutes a little bit, but just keeping an eye on I think just keeping an eye on what happens with Marcus Smart and his minutes will change up a little bit, but this Boston team running a tight rotation, you know where the minutes are going, where the usage is going, and I feel like just to sum it up, just taking some chances on Rob Williams, potentially a Derek White off the bench is something that I'll be doing. And someone asked about Peyton Pritchard. I really don't think it's necessary to go there by any means. If I was building one lineup, he definitely doesn't crack one lineup for me. But if I was 150 maxing, I do think I'll fall on some Pritchard, but it's not like something I'm going to be going out of my way to do because he's only $200 cheaper than Derek White and $300 on DraftKings. So he's not something that I'm super excited for. I do think there's some better value in the next game with no Dillon Brooks.
And I think one more guy we should talk about, just because once again, it's only a 2-game slate, leave no stone unturned, is Grant Williams has played really well in the playoffs. And it is so far different from what we saw from in the regular season, because for his entire career, Grant Williams has been absolute shit from a fantasy production standpoint. During the regular season, he played 25 minutes per game and averaged 17 fantasy points. So he's not somebody who's screamed fantasy upside. But now in the playoffs, all of a sudden we're starting to see some upside games from Grant Williams. 33 fantasy points last game. Closeout game against the Nets, 26 fantasy points. In game 2 against the Nets, he scored 30 fantasy points. Do you think there's actual upside here in Grant Williams, or is this just some 3-point variance? Because it's a level of play we've never really seen from him before.
So Grant Williams had an interesting tidbit of the news come out earlier in the week. I don't know if you saw this, but Ime Udoka did a radio, just like one of his radio interviews, and he said Williams said he expected plays to be called for him like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, like he wanted plays called for him like that. And I was just baffled to hear that. And then Ime Udoka said he called one play for him against Oklahoma City, and then SGA was guarding him on the post, and SGA blocked him, and that was his one attempt. He lost his opportunity to get plays called for Grant Williams. I just don't like Grant Williams, honestly. He's $4,500. He's playing above his head a little bit, so I'm willing to shy away. Shooting the 3-point, he's shooting at a very high 3-point percentage. I don't know what his percentage is in this series, but I'm willing to come under the field on him. He's not getting much ownership at all. 4,200 on DraftKings. Where you get the 3-point bonus, I'd rather fire him off over there. $4,500 on FanDuel. Power forward only look. I mean, that is not that appealing for me. I'm not that excited to go to Grant Williams tonight.
And something else to consider also is that if you and I are both anticipating that Robert Williams has more of a ceiling for his minutes, we also have to say, where is that playing time coming from? And Grant Williams seems the most likely candidate to me. Like Al Horford's played well enough that I don't think he's going to significantly see a reduction in minutes. But Grant Williams could certainly cede a couple of minutes to Robert Williams. Would you also agree that's probably where a couple extra minutes for Robert Williams would come from?
Yeah, that could definitely happen. Obviously that might also lead to less Horford at the 5 as well. And I think Grant Williams, I do think we've seen those the higher side of minutes this series. I think his minutes are more in the lower 20s or in high teens than what we've been getting of late, but he's been playing well. So we'll see what ends up happening tonight. So I think I'm just going to be selling high on Williams. I just don't think I don't think he's that good of a play today, but it can definitely burn me. It burned me last game out. So we'll see what those minutes actually look like. I'm just hoping for more Rob Williams minutes down the stretch here.
We are on the same page also because of my Celtics futures bets. I would like Robert Williams to get going because Robert Williams is really good and provides a lot of value to Boston, particularly on defense. You know what else provides a lot of value, Ryan? Our new promo code Luka, because you get $7 off for a full 7 days of Awesemo Plus Platinum, 77% off our usual weekly price. Do you know why it's 77% off? Not because Joey Corman is smart, but by total coincidence. We found out after the fact because Joey Corman could never do the math and figure these things out. But Luka's number, 77. His package, 77% off our normal weekly price. Get access to tools for basically every single DFS sport out there. We've got F1 projections now, USFL, tennis, anything you want. We've got you covered. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Don't forget, use that promo code Luka at checkout, LUKA. All right, let's move on to the other side of the game. When it comes to the Milwaukee Bucks, I think we have to start by talking about Giannis. And I have him projected for the most fantasy points on the slate. That's not a hot take. Everybody else is probably going to have him projected for the most fantasy points on the slate by a decent margin. The only question that really comes with Giannis is it going to be easy to get to him today? And how much exposure do we want, considering that a lot of these playoff slates don't necessarily have a ton of value? So, Ryan, how are you going to be handling Giannis on this two-gamer?
Yeah, Giannis, obviously, it's really valuable to have the highest scoring player on the slate in your lineup. And Giannis, if you were to run this slate out, this slate were to happen 100 times, he's probably the highest scoring player on the slate. Maybe just north of 50 or 60 times, or if not higher. Uh, May actually probably even higher now that I think about it. Who else is who he's competing with? I think Giannis is an exceptional play on FanDuel. Only $11,000. I like going to Giannis. I think he makes a lot of sense there, but he is not my. If I were to make one lineup, and if you were to like force me to play one Buck player, it might be Jrue Holiday because of the savings I'm getting. But I like Giannis a lot. I do think there should be enough value to jam him in. It might get a little dry with the value options that we have, but I'm willing to go there. I like Giannis a lot. I just think the floor of just him getting you around 60 fantasy points is fantastic, and that can carry you a long way, especially when he can be the high scoring player on the slate. And he's
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. I was just going to say I agree with you. And the other thing I was going to tie this into is when we were talking about the Celtics and you had said you prefer Jaylen Brown to Jason Tatum, I totally agree with that. And the main reason is because there's salary restrictions at some point. And if I'm paying up for somebody, I'd rather pay 11,000 for Giannis on FanDuel than 10,000 for Jason Tatum. And I'd rather pay 11,500 for Giannis on DK than 10,000 for Tatum. So I think the opportunity cost of rostering Giannis means less Tatum. And I'm totally cool with that trade-off.
Yeah, and I also think like if there's a guy who's going to get you 70, 75 fantasy points on the slate, it's going to be Giannis. So the ceiling is just fantastic. I know he hasn't been shooting as efficiently. I think he went 9 of 24 in the first game, but he got to the line a lot. You just got to like his ceiling. And by no means am I pushing for a Giannis fade on this slate. But if for some reason you do want to go full on balance build where there is a lot of merit to doing so on these two game slates, if you're hand building a lineup and you don't play Giannis, I wouldn't absolutely fault you for it. But I just think your opportunity cost is pretty significant if you're going to miss out on a Giannis ceiling game. And there's enough value to just get him in there based on the Dillon Brooks situation. Obviously, we talked about the Rob Williams potential minutes going up. We're hoping for that. So there is some value to just get him in there. And it's not that hard to get him in there on a two-game slate, which is nice. It's not like an absolute must-have, but he seems very nice to have in your lineup today.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is it's kind of out of sight, out of mind because he's been out for so long. But Chris Middleton still isn't back for the Bucks, and he might not be back even next series if the Bucks were to make it that far. And there's a usage increase that Giannis gets without Middleton, and his price has never really changed for that. Like if you think about Giannis's price in the regular season compared to now, he's 11,500 on DK, 11,000 on FanDuel. That's more or less where we normally see him in the regular season when Middleton is active. And now we're also getting extended minutes from Giannis. So it's a value type situation we don't really think about. But if this was a regular season slate once again where there was no Middleton, everybody would be firing off Giannis at this price tag. And he's going to be popular again today. So it's not like people are avoiding him or anything like that, but just kind of tying that into the value consideration on the price tag with Giannis. Moving down the pricing tier with the rest of the Bucks guys, Jrue Holiday to me is at a point now where I think the price is a little bit steep for me. He's $8,100 on DraftKings, FanDuel. He's $8,300, and he's also expected to be really popular. It's a two-game slate, so it's not to say he's unplayable, but considering he's projected for 40% ownership on FanDuel, and then on DK he is projected for 30% ownership, I think this is a number I'm ultimately going to come underweight to the field on. I prefer getting to Giannis, some of the Grizzlies guys. I prefer getting to Jason Tatum in the same price range. How do you view Jrue Holiday?
Yeah, Jrue Holiday, I like a lot. I mean, he's the second guy on this team that needs to be running the show. And if the defense, there are times where we saw in the first game where Jrue Holiday just kind of carried the team when Giannis picked up that fifth foul and played really well. I like going to Holiday. a lot, and I like being above the field on a guy like him. I just think he's playing really well, and I think the way they're focusing on Giannis is just opening up things a bit more, and also there's no Middleton, so he's also getting more of that usage sprinkled his way as well, and he's coming in pretty favorably. And like Jrue Holiday, just with the given situation, he has the upside of being the second top two guard on the slate. So that reason alone is why I like chasing the potential ceiling from Holiday. I mean, you're in the guard spot. He's competing with guys like obviously Ja Morant, Steph Curry, and the next tier guys are guys like Jordan Poole and Marcus Smart. But Jrue Holiday, I like a decent amount, and I think I will be definitely over the field on him on both sides. So I just like everything that how things look for him on this slate. I think the ceiling is there, and I think that we're at a price tag where I'm willing to take my chances with him, um, kind of across the board. So I think the minutes could be upwards of, I don't know, if you were to tell me Jrue Holiday was going to play 40 minutes today, I think that's certainly in the cards. So I like going to Jrue Holiday just because minutes upside and seems pretty awesome in terms of like what he's been able to do in the series.
Yeah, so we're a little bit different on that. I think I view Jrue Holiday as being really safe. As for the ceiling, though, I agree. I think he could play 40 minutes. That's where he's kind of been capped out in the postseason. But there have been other teams that we've seen more liberal with the minutes and allow their guys to play north of 40 minutes, like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum playing mid 40s minutes in a bunch of games. And in general, the ceiling hasn't been there for Jrue Holiday in the playoffs. He has one game with 42 fantasy points, one game with 50 fantasy points, and then he's been 38 or lower in every single other playoff game. And in general, I just view Holiday as being a high floor play and not as much a high ceiling. And at his price tag, I don't value that quite as much on this 2-game slate. But like you said, you could end up projecting him for more minutes than me, and then it would make him look different because you give somebody 2 extra minutes on a 2-game slate. And that's something where if you just run your lineups in Fantasy Cruncher, that could be the difference. 2 minutes could be the difference between getting somebody in 15% of lineups and like 35% of lineups. But at least in the initial build I did, I ended up coming underweight to Jrue Holiday. But I'll definitely consider what you said. Maybe I'll up them just because how highly I value your opinion, Ryan. But filling out the rest of the guys on the Bucks, I guess Bobby Portis is kind of in a tier of his own, and then there's just a bunch of role players that I don't think are massively appealing. But once we get past Giannis and Jrue Holiday, what stands out to you, if anything, from the Bucks?
Yeah, it's kind of role player roulette on the Bucks, and in terms of just like ranking these guys as out, I do think Bobby Portis would be my favorite role player to target here, but it's kind of hard to go there in confidence. Brook Lopez minutes, I do think are kind of going to fluctuate throughout this series, and I think they're going to potentially dip a little bit. I'd rather play just straight up. I'd rather play Rob Williams at that price tag. So it's tough for me to go to Brook Lopez in any exciting fashion. Can Brook Lopez knock down 5 threes, get you that backdoor double double? Sure. On DK, where you get the 3 point bonus, yeah. On FanDuel, I don't like him that much at 5K. I'd rather play Rob Williams, but it's role player roulette. Just looking at guys who you can target. I think if it's not Portis, who's 6,100, he's like kind of expensive even. Honestly, it might be Pat Connaughton just purely based off price. He's 4K and $3,400. That's the guy who I think I'd be willing to take some more chances on than the rest of the field, just purely on price at $3,400. So it's a tough situation here to go in any sort of confidence, just because it's kind of hard to draw conclusions on based off just like these first couple games. I'm not sure what to really expect in terms of minutes. I know they seem kind of fluctuated. Wesley Matthews is getting started. He's awful to play, but he's even getting some ownership on DraftKings potentially today. So I really don't have much interest, but I think Connaughton would be the guy just purely on price and the savings, just to potentially me to like pay up for some extra studs and upgrade other players in other positions.
Yeah, I think the Bucks on the low end are probably the least intriguing team for value today. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah, it's tough to go there. I know they even run a tight rotation. Sometimes that should be enough an indicator to take some chances on. But we're dealing in the next game with potentially a new rotation. Uh, Both will have different starting lineups. So there is some chances to exploit uh, being on the right side of the rotation, predicting what the rotation might look like in that Golden State and Memphis matchup. We did see what it might look like as both Brooks and Gary Payton both left the game at the same time and what the rotation might look like. But I'd rather take some chances in that game with the value than in this game. And obviously, and not that it matters that much, but the total is I want to say 10 points, or sorry, yeah, 10 points greater, or 13 points greater in the Golden State Memphis game than the Milwaukee Boston game, which is 13 points is a decent amount.
Yeah. And once again, I think one thing that's going to help us out, we're about to talk about the Grizzlies-Warriors game, and you mentioned that we're going to be looking at new rotations. The reason being, just to reiterate, is there is no Dillon Brooks for Memphis. There is no Gary Payton for Golden State. So there's going to be a little bit more potential for value for cheap guys when we get to there. So I don't think we really need to dumpster dive too much and try to hope for value out of these Bucks guys. It's not to say one of them couldn't pop off in a fluke kind of situation, but I think we're going to feel a little bit safer going to some of the Bucks and Warriors guys we'll be talking about in a second. But first, I want to shout out the sponsor of our show, PrizePicks, because if you guys sign up at PrizePicks for the first time using the promo code Awesemo, you get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit and 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Find all the tools you need to build winning NBA DFS lineups. Also, on PrizePicks, I'm just looking over some of the numbers here, Ryan, and here's something that really stands out to me. Considering the amount of playing time he's getting, Jason Tatum as a rebound prop, over under 6 rebounds. I love the over on that number because Jason Tatum is playing so many minutes, and you consider the situation also a 1-1 series. We're heading on the road to Milwaukee. This is going to be a pivotal game. I think we're going to be getting over 40 minutes of Jason Tatum. That is a really low rebound prop at 6. And at the very least, I think that's pretty safe to push. So I like over 6 rebounds. How does that sound to you?
That looks fantastic. Do you want to guess on what our free tool has the expected win percentage at for that prop?
It's going to be high. I don't know, 70%?
You're wrong. It is 85% expected win. So it seems like a fantastic play. And I've mentioned that taking advantage of these quote unquote prop inefficiencies across all different markets, that being this one, that being player props on sportsbooks or other sponsors such as Underdog, they have a player prop based contest as well. It is, I think, an excellent way to build a bankroll. And I think just using a free tool out there, you're going to be a leg up on it's not the field you're trying to beat them, but you're going to be in a leg up in terms of giving yourself the best chance to be profitable over a long period of time. So definitely check out that free tool. And yeah, I mean, that's a pretty awesome rebound prop to take advantage of it. And it wouldn't shock me if he hits it in the first half. So I expect that to change. They do change throughout the day, right? On
Yeah.
PrizePicks.
Yeah, and they do pretty often. So once again, if you're gonna sign up for PrizePicks, probably makes sense to do it now while some of these good numbers are available because they'll probably move throughout the day. Just do it using the promo code Awesemo, get a little bit of extra money in your pocket, and also free access to our Awesemo Plus Platinum tools for a month. So let's move on to the next game: the Memphis Grizzlies, the Golden State Warriors, and we have some injury situations, some value to talk about. And Ryan, with Dillon Brooks suspended for assaulting Gary Payton II and breaking his arm last game, who do you see being the cheap guy that steps up and takes on the biggest increased role in the Grizzlies rotation?
So last game we saw, I believe Zaire Williams ended up closing the game, correct? If I'm not mistaken. So, but I don't necessarily think that'll be the case again. Those Zaire Williams minutes can easily become into John Conchar. They could easily become into more Kyle Anderson. I'm a little skeptical on Zaire Williams getting a lot of those minutes. I know he closed, he played well, hit a big three, I believe. But I think once Dillon Brooks got ejected, I need to just make sure who entered the game there. I believe it was Kyle. No, it was DeAnthony Melton entered the game.
I remember it being Melton. I'd have to check a popcorn machine to be double sure. But I remember it being Melton because thinking like, oh, cool, Melton's definitely going to break the slate as a pivot off of Pritchard and Derek White when Brooks got ejected. Like I remember that going through my head.
Yeah, so just pulling up seeing what happens here. Yes. So Dillon Brooks gets ejected, and D'Anthony Melton seems like the one who entered the game. So my guess would be Melton, but I don't necessarily think Melton is going to start. I think it could be easily Kyle Anderson who gets to start here, just because of I think Kyle Anderson can fit in right there. I think they like Melton coming off the bench, giving that firepower off the bench. But that is something that's going to be very interesting to see how that will play out. I would shy away from Zaire Williams. He's priced up a lot at $4,700 on FanDuel, and he's $3,200 on DraftKings. I'm just not sure what those minutes will look like. And as crazy as it sounds, I'm willing to take a flyer on a guy like John Conchar at 3K. He might only play 10, 12 minutes, but I don't think there's going to be much ownership going to him. And I easily think he could get uh, the Zaire Williams minutes off the bench depending on game flow. Another thing to keep an eye on, I know Steven Adams returned. I have no idea what they're going to do. And I don't think I easily can see Steven Adams getting the start here tonight. And I know they've gone away from it, but I think I'd rather have him start than Xavier Tillman,
Yeah.
honestly. But I really like just building some lineups with Steven Adams, but he is priced extremely favorably at $3,400. And I'm willing to take some chances on him, even if he doesn't start, just because we're going to get him at low ownership, and he just helps you get in a stars and scrubs lineup on a 2-game slate. There's a lot of question marks with this rotation for Memphis tonight. Proceed with caution, but be willing to take some risks on guys like Slow-Mo, even Steven Adams. Melton's priced up. He's coming off the bench. Even Tyus Jones might get some extra minutes. All these guys, I can easily see Dillon Brooks' 30, mid-30s minutes be spread across the guys like Tyus Jones, Melton, Slow-Mo are the three guys that come to mind, and Zaire Williams / John Conchar.
Yeah, one thing that's tricky about the Grizzlies is most teams when they get into the playoffs condense their rotation. That is not what the Grizzlies have done. They're just playing the same like deep 10-man rotation they did in the regular season. And it makes minutes pretty tricky to project because outside of Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, I'm not confident in saying anybody on this team plays over 30 minutes. I would say with Jaren Jackson Jr., but the foul risk is so significant with him that I don't think you could ever confidently say that Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to play 36 minutes. There's clear upside in Triple J, but I'm never comfortable projecting him to play, say, like 36 because the foul risk is there. As it comes to Zaire Williams, there's a very, very, very low ceiling with him. But we've also seen him start a lot. So I think we kind of have an idea of what he's going to look like as a starter because he started 31 games in the regular season. He averaged 26 minutes and 16 fantasy points. That's probably about a fair expectation for him. If you're in desperate need of salary in DraftKings only, it's okay to roster him, but I wouldn't go too heavy because the ceiling is pretty capped. And also, I'm with you on Steven Adams. I've gotten destroyed trying to project this Memphis Grizzlies front court for a lot of the postseason. It's been a really difficult task to do. I've been burned by Steven Adams before, but I'm probably willing to do it again here. Not to the point where like I want to get Steven Adams in 20% of my lineups or anything, but he's almost, unless he starts, he's going to be almost unowned today. And I wouldn't be surprised if he carves out some sort of role in the rotation. And even 5 to 10% of Steven Adams could be a massive difference maker on a 2-game slate. Is that kind of how you're viewing Adams as well?
Yeah, and just to I guess compare Adams, it's a price tag play. He's $3,400. Let's say if he gets like the honorary start of each half, right? He still starts the first half and second half. Even if he plays 12 minutes, I'm willing to take some chances at 12 minutes just because he opens things up a little bit. It's not I don't think if I were building one lineup, does Adams fall in there? I don't think I'm that bullish on him, but I do think they should start him just to see how things would go. But yeah, it's someone who I'm willing to take some chances on. I mean, it's Steven Adams. If you were to tell me at the tomorrow morning that Adams played 24 minutes, it would not shock me. And if Xavier Tillman's out of the rotation, yeah, that could definitely happen. But it's going to be, yeah, like you said, the minutes on this team, especially now with Taylor Jenkins, he just keeps like obviously changing things up. His in-game adjustments have been very disappointing in the playoffs, I think, and then he's going up against the kind of the Jedi of series adjustments in Steve Kerr. I'm gonna be very if guys like Zaire Williams get a lot of ownership, I'm gonna be like shying away and just taking like willing to spend up for like a slow mo or other guys. But I know we talked about these role players, but looking at like the guys who've been getting a lot of these minutes for this Memphis team, speaking of minutes, the guy who's allergic to minutes and in love with foul trouble is Jaren Jackson Jr. If this guy does not get in foul trouble, he could be like a 9K player. It's just all like he needs to go to some sort of like foul therapy. I have no idea how we can get this guy to like keep his hands to himself. Like it is pretty bizarre, and it's in terms of like a fantasy perspective, it's really annoying and like man, like just foul trouble and the way coaches handle it at times, it's really tilting. But here we are. Know the floor with Jaren Jackson Jr. He could pick up 4 first half fouls and play only 20 minutes, and that could definitely change things up. But I gotta like his ceiling. And honestly, if you were to tell me would I in one lineup would I rather play Ja Morant or Jaren Jackson Jr. today, I'm going with Jaren Jackson Jr. because I think Steve Kerr is going to change up the defensive scheme on Ja Morant today. And there might be a situation where we see Steve Kerr blitz Ja Morant a bit more to force the ball out of his hands. And he's with Triple J only $6,300 on DK, and he comes in at $7,100 on FanDuel. I just like the ceiling that we might get out of him. But keep in mind, we know the risk with him. He's just like foul trouble, and it's pretty like embarrassing at this point.
Yeah, and I will say this at least. And by the way, Bruce, I see your super chat. We're going to answer it in a sec. I just wanted to get through some of these other Memphis players, and then we'll hit on your super chat, and then we'll round up by talking about Ja Morant. But when it comes to Jaren Jackson Jr., the upside is very apparent, as like you said, is the downside because of the foul issues. I'll say this at least, though. His risk of getting in foul trouble guarding like Draymond Green is significantly less than when he had to match up against Karl Anthony Towns last series. Now, does it necessarily mean he's going to totally avoid? No, he fouled out last game in 29 minutes, but we were seeing him foul out in sub 20 minutes in the series against the Timberwolves. So I think this is a little.
Yeah. It's been an exponential improvement compared to the first round, an exponential improvement. And like you said, I do think obviously going up against Cat, a ball dominant offensive center is much more different than a facilitating playmaker in Draymond Green.
Yeah, and so that's something I think helps him a little bit. And by the way, there was people, and I mean, we had in our projections where there was like going out projecting Jaren Jackson Jr. for like 24 minutes, which is just a foul trouble projection. And I can't even say it's wrong. I don't think in general we should project players for foul trouble, but you kind of have to at Triple J because he has now fouled out. He's had 5 or more personal fouls in all but 2 playoff games to this point. So it's been an issue for him, but I like getting to the upside when he's lower owned. And once again, after fouling out last game, the ownership is dipped. So I like his upside for tournaments. I will talk about Ja Morant in a second, but first we have to answer a super chat from our guy, Bruce. Bruce, thank you for leaving the super chat. He wants to know who are our favorite 3 picks over on PrizePicks today. So I'll pull PrizePicks back up. For sure, one of them for me is Jason Tatum over 6 rebounds. We talked about that one before. I think that one makes a ton of sense. I'm pulling up PrizePicks right now and looking at some of the NBA lines and seeing what else could make sense.
I think another one I'm willing to take my chances. I don't know what Desmond Bane did to blow out his back, but this boy's back is like a senior citizen status. But I still think I like taking my chances with Desmond Bane over 4 rebounds. And our expected win percentage comes in at 76% with Desmond Bane. And we nailed the Tatum one. I'll let you pick the third one. I like Bane over 4 rebounds today.
Yeah, I'm looking through some of these right now. Let's see. Fantasy point totals aren't up quite yet. What are some of the Robert Williams props? Are there anything low? Is there anything low for Robert Williams? Let's see. Robert Williams is at 7.5 rebounds. I like taking the over on Robert Williams at 7.5 rebounds. Once again, I think there's a chance we see increased playing time from him, and he doesn't have to get to his regular season, his regular season average minutes per game in order to hit the over. on his rebound prop, because during the regular season, he averaged 9.4 rebounds per game in 29 minutes. We're looking at a 7.5 rebound prop. If you're just telling me he's going to play 26 or 28 minutes, I would still be projecting him for north of 7.5 rebounds. And I think there is a chance that he plays those extended minutes. Something else I might look at is look at what sportsbooks might be offering for alternate lines on the over rebounds for Robert Williams. But those are three that I'm going to like. What you just pointed out, and then also Robert Williams, the Jason Tatum, and Bruce. I think those are three prize pick cards that you could build three prize pick props that you could build a card around. All right, let's get back to the Memphis Grizzlies now, Ryan, and just round it up by talking about Ja Morant here. And one thing I really think helps Morant is not that he needs any help at this point, because he's been tremendous in the series. But with Dillon Brooks out, you're just eliminating somebody who takes a lot of dumb shots and likes to take usage away from Ja Morant. Morant should get all of the usage he can handle, which should be the case anyway. But now he doesn't have Dillon Brooks there taking some shots. I think Morant is getting slept on a little bit on this slate because he's currently projected for, 34% ownership on FanDuel seems about appropriate, but 30% on DK. I would rather roster Ja Morant than Jason Tatum. Do you feel the same way, or would you rather go with Tatum?
Ooh, I'd rather go with Morant than Tatum. Obviously, your similar salary allocations going there. Obviously, Morant is coming off a career game, dropped a 47 piece, was fantastic all game long, and he's just kind of getting, they're just letting, Golden State's kind of letting him cook. Now, I guess, a lot of times in these series, in these playoff DFS slates, you kind of have to put yourself in the coach's shoes and try to think what the coach might do to change up the game plan. Steve Kerr's an all-time head coach at just doing series adjustments. And if you guys don't know, each time Steve Kerr has made the playoffs, he has been in the NBA Finals for a reason. So I know he has worked with some great players along the way, but he is really good at doing series adjustments. I do expect an adjustment on Ja Morant. Now, with no Gary Payton today, I think Andrew Wiggins is going to be the primary defender for most of the game whenever Wiggins is on the court out of foul trouble. Wiggins is going to, I think, have the task of trying to limit/contain Ja Morant to a certain extent. And there might be times where they blitz Morant for certain aspects in the game where they might try to force the ball out of Morant's hand, as they should, and they should let other guys on the team beat him, potentially a Bane, potentially a Triple J, or a slow-mo. This is all hypothetical. I'm just trying to put myself in Steve Kerr's shoes, and my opinion probably doesn't matter to Steve Kerr, but I do think if they want to get the ball to Memphis's best player, it might improve their chances to win. But on a DFS perspective, I just think I'm a little more bullish on Morant. I'd rather play Steph Curry on the other side of things, based on ownership, recency bias, and I think obviously Morant has a little higher ceiling. We've seen it. But I just think I'm the one to shy away if someone is coming off a playoff career high and just as a masterpiece of a game than rather to go back to him.
I think that makes a little bit of sense too from this standpoint. Is I do have to think back about what I said at the top of the show. And obviously I haven't built lineups at this point in the day. So this is something just talking to you or Adam, whoever I do the strategy show with in the morning. It just kind of helped me think through the slate. Is I did say earlier that I think ownership tends to be a little bit more impacted by what happened in previous games. And considering how good Morant was, it's always hard to quantify with numbers, but I do think people will probably be more apt to get to Morant than they normally would just because he just played so well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ultimately ends up being higher owned than what his ownership projection is just because of what happened last game. So that is something that's worth talking about, or at least something that's worth thinking about when making lineups. One other guy that we haven't really talked about for Memphis, I know you talked about him when we went over the prize pick stuff, but what do you make of this back injury to Desmond Bane? Because I still think he's really good. I still think the upside's there. But it's not only that he's playing poorly the last couple of games, he's not taking shots. 15% usage in game one of the series, 12% usage in game two. Do you think this is do you think it's because of the back injury? Is it a fluke? Is it something else? Like what does his recent usage do in terms of how you want to roster him in DFS?
Yeah, the reason why I brought up the extra day of rest, I think this benefits Desmond Bane out of any player on the slate the most. I don't know what happened to this guy's back in between the first round one and round two, but this guy did something to it, and that is it's fucked everything up for this guy. But I think he's battling through it, um, and it's just been a situation they're just letting Ja cook on them. It's just been like, hey, Ja, just get in the lane, do an acrobatic layup, and we'll just jog back on the other side of things. And I think that we should get Desmond Bane not to return to his usage. What we saw in the Minnesota series was a completely different defensive scheme where they, we saw Desmond Bane get more usage. I just like going back to Bane here just because of I think we might get the minutes to be in the high 30s, barring any foul trouble. And it's a tough price tag at 6,400 when Jaren Jackson Jr. is $100 cheaper than him. I know, granted, shooting guard only Desmond Bane versus power forward center Jaren Jackson Jr. I'm just looking at the salary allocation, but at a $5,800 price tag on FanDuel, I like a decent amount. Now, it's going to be important to see what the starting lineup might look like. I mean, I expect Bane to remain in there, but who is he going to be playing alongside? Is it going to be a Melton or a Slow-Mo? Or is it going to be Tyler Williams who enters the starting lineup? Where the Dillon Brooks usage was obviously gone after the ejection last game, but I just think the opportunity of him getting back some more usage, I think, is definitely in the cards. At $5,800 on FanDuel, I like going to Bane over there. Not so much on DK, where he's only shooting guard only. And FanDuel, he's shooting guard small forward only. Really, is very nice to have that multi-position eligibility. He is one of the highest owned projected players on the slate, which I just noticed, and it makes me look. I'd rather maybe willing to pivot a little bit more now that I think about it. But that's a very nice price tag for him in potentially high 30s minutes, and we've seen him put up very, very nice playoff games throughout playoff performances throughout that first round.
Yeah, I think there's clear upside. Desmond Bane, just once again, keep an eye on the ownership as we get closer to lock. He's projected for north of 50% ownership right now on FanDuel. If you guys are looking to bet on games during the NBA postseason, or if you're just looking to get action on any sport that's really out there, now is the time to check out our best bets package. Click the link below to subscribe to our team of experts. Guys like Ben Rasa, Steve Buzzard, Alex Baker, they're putting premium bets in our Discord channel, and it's something that pays for itself. The package, $25 a week. We've been tracking the results, positive ROI. So you sign up for the package, and once again, it's going to pay for itself and put in a little bit of extra money in your pocket as well. And if you want a free preview of some of the stuff that's in our premium bets package, follow at Awesemo Best Bets on Twitter, and then turn on the notifications because we'll be taking one of our bets from our premium Discord channel, and we post it each day out there on Twitter. So check that out. One more thing, also like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel because we're about to talk about the final team on the slate, the Golden State Warriors, who are going to be slightly shorthanded today and going forward because Gary Payton II, who's one of the better perimeter defenders in all of the NBA, broke his arm. He was taken out midair by Dillon Brooks last game, the reason that Dillon Brooks is suspended as well. So with Gary Payton out, he had been starting for the Warriors. What do you think the starting unit looks like, Ryan?
What does the starting unit look like? This is a tricky situation. I'm not sure if they remain to play that small lineup. Uh, it wouldn't shock me if Kevon Looney gets like the honorary start, plays the first half 5 minutes and second half 5 minutes. It also wouldn't shock me if we see, um, what's his name, enter the starting lineup. Jordan Poole if they go small, but Steve Kerr came out and said it's like he's not too keen on playing that lineup that many minutes, so it would shock me if they go with Jordan Poole there. But if Otto Porter might join that starting lineup, a guy who I certainly don't think that'll be in the starting lineup is Damian Lee. He got rotational minutes, I think, due to some foul trouble for the team there. But yeah, I think it's gonna be Kevon Looney, but I'm not too sure. I just don't know. It would shock me if it's Kaminga or Porter, but I think in likely order of who replaces Gary Payton in the lineup, I'm gonna go Looney, Porter, uh, Poole, Kaminga is the order of the starting five. Do you disagree with that?
It's so hard to know because they've started Poole at times during the postseason. I would not be shocked if we see Looney start for the Warriors and Steven Adams for the Grizzlies. That's kind of my gut feeling what we end up seeing. But once again, there's a whole wide range of outcomes we could see for the starting lineup. I have minimal confidence. If you were to ask me what I think the most likely starting lineup is, I'd say Jordan Poole in place of Gary Payton, just because we've seen that in the postseason.
Jordan Poole in place of Gary Payton. Yeah, Kerr had some not so promising comments of that quote unquote PTSD lineup plus Wiggins. Um, we'll see if that changes. I mean, I'm very curious to see what ends up happening, but yeah, I completely can see if you're to tell me at 8:30, 8:25 Eastern, we get Adams and Looney starting, I would not be shocked at all, and I think both coaches might end up doing that. But in terms of like the Golden State perspective, why are they not hunting Ja Morant like on the one-on-one situation? They've done really well when they've hunted him, but it just goes. It's like the anti-Kerr to hunt Ja Morant. The system's just based on ball movement, more passes and dribbles. Like it's just like how they've been so good for like almost nearing a decade now. I think they need to hunt Ja Morant and just expose him over and over again. Whenever they did hunt Morant, they did really well. So a fun follow throughout the series has been Bob Voulgaris. Just like he's been like just like confused on why they haven't hunted Morant. I kind of agree with him.
Yeah.
And I think there will be more hunting Ja Morant today, just because I think more game tape and just it just shows like they've done really well when they have hunted him. And if they're gonna hunt Morant, it's gonna be the most beneficial to a Steph Curry. Definitely, it's gonna benefit him the most. So he is my favorite warrior to go to. He has been throughout the playoffs, and no, sorry, throughout the second round, not the playoffs. But I really like Steph Curry, and honestly, if I were building one lineup today, I would play Curry rather than Ja Morant because of the savings, the 3 point bonus, and there is going to be a couple games in this series where Steph Curry out has more fantasy points than Ja Morant, and I think today will be one of them. And I just need to make some sort of differentiation from the field, and why not with Steph Curry, who could really honestly drop 40 real life points.
Yeah, and I mean something else to consider about hunting Ja Morant on defense. It would do a couple things. Number one, he's the worst defender in on the Memphis Grizzlies team that gets regular rotation minutes. But also that would wear him out a little bit on offense to the point where he wouldn't just be able to blow. I mean, it's going to be hard to stop Ja Morant totally on defense, but it would help by attacking him on offense a little bit more and maybe emptying his gas tank a little bit, make him work on defense, make it harder for him on offense and fatigue him a little bit. So I do think that's something we could see more often. And Steph Curry, relative to the other pay-up options on the slate, he is the least popular right now. Projected for, and it's relative to 2 game slate, but he's projected for 30% ownership on DraftKings and 33% on FanDuel for Steph Curry standards, a relatively reduced price point. So I could get behind being overweight to Steph Curry. What do you make of some of the value options here? I know we've gone through some of the players that could potentially end up in the starting lineup for the Warriors in place of Gary Payton, but we've got Otto Porter's fairly cheap. He could see extended minutes. We mentioned Looney could potentially start. Jonathan Kuminga, he is the same nickname as my mom. He's cheap, particularly on DraftKings. So of the cheap guys on the Warriors, which one do you find to be the best source of salary savings?
Cheap guys on the Warriors. It's gonna be Otto Porter for me. Honestly, I think Otto Porter, they might go with an extra wing and the ability to switch. I think Otto Porter definitely has that. Kuminga is definitely offensively very gifted. He's just an athletic specimen. But where he does lack is a little bit on defense. And in the playoffs, coaches, especially Steve Kerr, he can't they never want to risk bad defense. And if Kuminga gets picked on, which he certainly can, I'm a little shy. I know he's only 3,100. I'm a little. I'd rather shy away from that. Otto Porter can put up high 20s fantasy points, there's a pathway for him getting there. How he gets there is potentially Draymond Green foul trouble potential, Andrew Wiggins foul trouble, and there's one less, I guess, wing if you're going to call Gary Payton a wing. He's more in the backcourt, but Gary Payton's minutes can get sprinkled to Otto Porter, as we saw it last game as well. So I like Otto Porter at that price tag. And if you were to say, I know we talked about Grant Williams before. I prefer Otto Porter to Grant Williams, just like kind of straight up. So those are the type of decision factors that I take a look at, and like where I can pivot. I know Porter's going to get a little bit more ownership, but I think it's well worth it.
And then just rounding this out by talking about the other, not necessarily role players on the Warriors, but the secondary scoring options when we look at Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole, and Andrew Wiggins, and then, Draymond Green as a distributor. I think all of these guys warrant some consideration, but I'm not necessarily prioritizing any of them. These are probably guys that just end up close to the field on. Are any of these guys really high priority plays for you? Klay, Draymond, Poole, Wiggins?
Um, I like Draymond Green. I've liked him pretty much throughout this series. Draymond Green will. I'm gonna go ahead and say Draymond Green will have a triple double at some point in this series. $6,500 on FanDuel is exceptional. And Draymond Green is one of those sneaky guys on the slate who can be the highest scoring player. He has that in him. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but Draymond Green can get there with steals and blocks, obviously triple double upside as well. I like Draymond Green quite a bit. Klay Thompson is a much better shooter than this. If you don't like Steph Curry, I don't have any issues if you play both, but Klay Thompson regular 3-point bonus on DK, I like a lot. I mean, the Achilles ACL, the minutes, there's no minutes restriction for Klay. He is playing, there have been games he's playing 40 plus minutes. So I like this Golden State team in general, and I really hope they win this series because I want to see a Golden State Phoenix conference finals matchup. But I like the Golden State, kind of like their roster pretty much. I mean, in terms of fantasy perspective as well, I think they're all priced favorably, even Wiggins, just because of the minutes he's playing. And uh, I'm willing to take some chances on all their starters, kind of getting above the field on most of those guys.
All right, and that is pretty much going to round it up. Unless, do you have any other thoughts you want to bring up on the slate before we close out, Ryan?
Yeah, be willing to obviously keep an eye. There's a massive gap in game time and potential starting lineups to deal with. I mean, there's Kyle Anderson, Tyus Jones. One thing that we didn't, I think, what do you think? Who do you think Memphis will start is the key thing. I don't think Tyus Jones will enter the starting lineup, and I don't think it's tough to say. I don't even know what they're going to do. But keep an eye on the starting lineup for Memphis. It could be a bunch of different combinations. Be willing to take some chances off some bench guys on both teams.
My best guess would be Zaire. So I want to say my best guess would be Zaire Williams just because he started all regular season when Dillon Brooks was out, but he also is kind of garbage, Zaire Williams. And once again, because people in chat do this, when we say a player is no good, they're like, oh, you think you're better? No, I don't think I'm better at basketball than Zaire Williams. It's all relative to other NBA players. And if you look at the Grizzlies roster, Zaire Williams is at best the 9th best player on the team, probably lower than that. Relative to other players on the Grizzlies, they have better options to go to than Zaire Williams, but they've started him in a bunch of these spots before. So I guess I would say Zaire Williams is my most confident pick, but it's still like a well under 50% confidence interval.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I think Zaire Williams is a very, very talented basketball player, and I think he has a lot of growing to do. I mean, he was, I believe, one of the most highly touted high school athletes before high school players headed to Stanford. I mean, yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think all of these basketball players are exceptional. They've probably given everyone buckets. I mean, at one point before the NBA, they are the best player on their team more times than not. So they're definitely world-class athletes for a reason. So we'll see what ends up happening in the starting lineup. I need to, I guess, be willing to take some guesses. It's going to be really important to be able to nail that kind of beforehand. It's a very interesting 2-game slate because of the time gap and what we're dealing with the second game with injury, suspension, guys coming back from health and safety protocols. So we'll see what ends up happening.
All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. Once again, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around. We've got the MLB strategy show coming up right after this.